But ladies, let me tell you something. There's power in your softness. There's thunder in your calm. There is fire in your ability to forgive. But listen to me now, being gentle is not the same thing as being weak. Being kind is not the same thing as being blind. And just because your heart is open doesn't mean it's a doormat. Somewhere along the way, somebody confused humility with submission. They confused compassion with codependency. And far too many of you started believing that being a good woman means tolerating bad behavior. That if you speak softly, you have to suffer silently. That if you choose love, you have to lose yourself. But that's a lie, and it's time to rewrite that story. Being a gentle woman doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It means you've mastered the strength to walk away with grace. It means you can smile without swallowing your boundaries. It means your no is wrapped in velvet, but it's still firm. It means you lead with love, but you don't let anyone lead you into disrespect. Because, baby, you weren't made to shrink. You weren't built to be broken. You were born with a voice, not a leash. Some people will only see the side of you that makes their life easier. The nurturer, the peacekeeper, the one who holds it all together. They'll take your kindness as compliance and your patience as permission. But remember this, people will treat you exactly how you let them. And if you allow disrespect under the banner of being nice, you'll slowly become a stranger to yourself. Being gentle doesn't mean you have to make everyone else comfortable while you're dying inside. You can be gentle and still say, that doesn't work for me. You can be gentle and still cut off the energy that's draining you. You can be gentle and still walk away when love starts to look like labor. Let's talk about relationships, because this is where most women lose themselves first. You start out loving with your whole heart. You give, you care, you build. And then one day you find yourself over-giving, over-functioning, and over-explaining while he's underperforming. You're carrying the emotional labor of two people while he gets comfortable in your effort. You're negotiating for crumbs and calling it a meal. Let me tell you something real. A man who respects you will never put you in a position where you have to beg for clarity, consistency, or commitment. A man who sees your worth won't gamble with your peace. And a man who's ready for a woman like you will rise, not retreat. You don't have to yell. You don't have to fight. You don't have to lose your femininity to protect your dignity. What you do need is standards and the courage to enforce them without apology. You don't need to convince anyone to see your value. You just need to stop offering discounts to people who never deserved front row seats in the first place. And to the woman who says, but I don't want to be alone. Listen, it is better to walk alone in alignment than to sleep next to someone who makes you feel emotionally homeless. It is better to spend your nights in peace than to spend your days performing for affection. Be gentle, but never be a doormat. Now, I know you were raised to be polite, to be likable, to be agreeable, but let me ask you something, at what cost? How many dreams have you delayed because you didn't want to offend anyone? How many truths have you swallowed just to keep the peace? How many times have you smiled when your soul was screaming? And who has that ever served? You don't owe anyone your silence, not your family, not your partner, not your boss, not your friends. You were not put here to live small so others can feel tall. You were not made to fit into places that require you to amputate parts of your truth. If your kindness costs your authenticity, it's too expensive. If your gentleness turns into self-erasure, you've gone too far. If you can't love them without losing you, it's not love, it's sacrifice. And there's a difference. This world will test you. Life will push you. People will mistake your grace for weakness again and again. But you don't have to match that energy. You don't have to clap back. You don't have to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Just rise, just reset, just remember who you are. You are not weak for being soft. You are not wrong for being emotional. You are not broken because you feel deeply. In fact, your sensitivity is your superpower. Your intuition is your compass. Your compassion is your crown. But your boundaries, they are your armor. Every time you choose yourself, you teach the world how to love you. Every time you say no, you're saying yes to peace. Every time you walk away from dysfunction, you're walking toward your destiny. You were not created to fix broken people who don't want to heal. You were not designed to tolerate pain just to prove you're strong. You don't have to prove your loyalty by staying in places that dishonor your soul. Be gentle, but never be a doormat. Let's talk about your purpose. There's something inside you that was never meant to be tamed. A dream, a calling, a vision too wild for small minds. But as long as you're trying to please everyone, you'll never please the one person who matters most, yourself. Some of you are still sitting on ideas that could change your life because you're waiting for permission. You're waiting for the perfect moment. You're waiting for someone to tell you you're good enough. Let me be the one to tell you you are right now, as you are. You don't need more validation. You need more action. You don't need more reassurance. You need more faith. You don't need another sign. You need to move. There is a version of you on the other side of fear that is unstoppable, but she doesn't show up until you do. She doesn't reveal herself until you stop begging for direction and start walking with conviction. You want a life that feels good, then stop tolerating what drains you. You want a love that empowers you, then stop settling for what confuses you. You want peace, then stop inviting chaos in the name of kindness. You're not hard to love, you're just asking to be loved properly. You're not too much, you're just too honest for people who prefer illusion. You're not intimidating, you're just awakening the insecurity in people who benefit from your silence. Be gentle, but never be a doormat. And when they ask why you're different now, tell them, I got tired of bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand me a bandage. I got tired of proving my worth to people who were never qualified to measure it. I got tired of begging for reciprocity in rooms that only knew how to take. You changed because your peace became your priority. You elevated because your boundaries got stronger. You glowed up because you stopped apologizing for shining. And to every woman listening, if you've ever been told you're too nice, don't change your heart. Just change who gets access to it. If you've ever been called too emotional, don't suppress your truth. Just stop handing it to people who weaponize it. Your gentleness is your power. Your grace is your weapon. Your love is your revolution. But your boundaries are the gate that protects everything you've built. So don't lower your standards just because you're lonely. Don't dim your light just because they can't handle the brightness. And don't stop being who you are just because the world hasn't figured out how to receive you. You are not here to make everyone else comfortable. You are here to rise, to lead, to heal, to love, without losing yourself in the process. So let them call you soft. Let them say you've changed. Let them talk. You know the truth. You're not weak. You're just not willing to be wounded anymore. You're not bitter. You're just done begging for basic respect. You're not cold. You just finally learned to love yourself the way you loved everyone else. There's a quiet kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice, but it never backs down. That's the woman you're becoming. You don't chase chaos. You don't entertain confusion. You don't keep explaining to people who hear you just fine, but choose not to listen. That's not gentleness. That's self-betrayal. And you've done enough of that. You're not obligated to suffer just because you're capable of surviving. Let that sink in. You've endured heartbreak without revenge. You've carried burdens in silence. You've smiled through disrespect just to keep the room from shattering. But grace doesn't mean self-erasure. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean emotionally available to everyone. Love isn't supposed to empty you, it's supposed to expand you. You were raised to be strong, but strength isn't just endurance. Sometimes it's the courage to finally say, I'm not doing this anymore. Sometimes it's walking out of the storm you kept yourself in just to prove you could survive it. Enough proving. You've done more than enough to prove you're loyal. You've stayed when you should have left. You've given when you had nothing left to give. And you called it love. But love that costs you your self-worth is not love, it's bondage. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't test your limit. Real love doesn't ask you to quiet your voice so someone else can sleep peacefully in their dysfunction. So now you get to choose peace. You get to choose alignment over attachment. You get to choose your future over their comfort. Yes, you can still be nurtured. Yes, you can still be compassionate. Yes, you can still believe in second chances, but don't forget yourself in the process. Don't confuse selflessness with self-abandonment. And don't let anyone, friend, lover, family, or otherwise, gaslight you into thinking your standards are the problem. They're not. They're your protection. They're the walls that separate peace from pain. Some people will only love you when you're convenient, when you ask for nothing, when you pour without ever needing to be poured into. And the moment you ask for mutuality, they call you difficult. Let them misunderstand the healed version of you. Let them walk away from the woman who no longer tolerates emotional poverty. Let them label your growth as arrogance. You don't need everyone's approval, just your own alignment. You know what's dangerous? A woman who's no longer afraid of losing people who don't value her. A woman who's finally clear that being alone is far less painful than being half loved. A woman who speaks truth without trembling and walks away without turning back. That woman, she's a force. She's a storm wrapped in sunlight. She's the future, and she's you. There will come a time, and maybe it's already here, where your silence won't be silence anymore. It'll be wisdom, where your stillness won't mean surrender. It'll mean strategy, where your exit won't be avoidance. It'll be a declaration. I've given enough and I'm reclaiming everything I lost, trying to be enough for people who never saw me clearly. They don't have to understand it. They don't have to applaud it. They don't even have to like it. Your peace is not up for a vote. You've been taught to stay soft no matter what, but softness doesn't mean tolerating harm. You can be a safe space without becoming someone's emotional landfill. You can be gentle, but you do not have to be available to everyone who not. Discernment is a form of self-respect. Energy is currency. Spend it wisely, and if they say you've changed, that you're different, that you've lost your edge, smile, because you didn't lose anything. You gained clarity, you gained standard, you gained the ability to walk away from anything that doesn't honor your value. Growth looks like letting go of roles that kept you small. It looks like refusing to dim yourself to be digestible. It looks like shedding the layers of nice girl and stepping into the full authority of your womanhood, unapologetically. You no longer bend to avoid discomfort. You no longer shrink to protect egos. You no longer explain your no, because when your heart is whole, your boundaries are clear. And when your boundaries are clear, your life begins to bloom. You start attracting people who don't just want your light, they respect your shadow. You stop craving validation from the very hands that hurt you. You stop chasing and start attracting. This is your season of reclaiming, your season of rising, your season of remembering who the hell you are. You don't need to fight for a seat at a table where you are the meal. Build your own table, set it with vision, with truth, with people who don't flinch when you speak with power and purpose. You were never meant to be tolerated. You were meant to be honored. But people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. So don't take it personal when they can't hold your depth. Just move forward, not out of spite, not out of ego, but out of reverence for the woman you're becoming. You've been quiet long enough. You've dimmed your truth long enough. You've carried the weight of other people's comfort long enough. Now you get to choose you with love, with clarity, with power. And yes, still with gentleness, because gentleness isn't weakness. It's the strength to rise without rage, the strength to speak without shouting, the strength to leave without burning everything down. So stay soft, but stay sovereign. Stay kind, but stay wise. You know what true freedom feels like? It's not the absence of struggle. It's not escaping pain. It's waking up in the morning and realizing you no longer have to perform. No more shrinking to fit someone else's vision of you. No more laughing at things that aren't funny just to keep the peace. No more accepting apologies without changed behavior. True freedom is when you can walk away from what used to paralyze you. Not because it doesn't matter, but because you finally do. For too long, you've been told to compromise, that love is sacrifice, that forgiveness means full access, that being a good woman means being quiet, being patient, being endlessly understanding. But understand this, compromise without reciprocity is a slow death. Sacrifice without support is a silent prison. And loyalty to dysfunction is not virtue, it's self-destruction. You are not here to hold everyone else up while your spirit crumbles. You are not here to teach grown people how to treat you every single day with no evidence they're willing to learn. You are here to grow. You are here to rise. You are here to love deeply, fully, boldly, but not blindly. There's a difference between being available and being accessible. Just because you have love to give doesn't mean it belongs everywhere. Just because you see someone's potential doesn't mean they're ready to grow. And just because someone needs you doesn't mean they deserve you. You can care and still protect your peace. You can empathize without enabling. You can forgive and still close the door. Because peace is not passive. Peace is power. And boundaries are the language of self-respect. Let me tell you something, you don't lose people by setting boundaries. You lose people who only benefited from your lack of them. And that's not a loss, that's alignment. You're not hard to love. You've just outgrown conditional spaces. You're not bitter, you're just aware. You're not distant, you're just discerning. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped apologizing for your standards. You stopped asking people to rise when they've made it clear they're comfortable on the floor. And listen, you don't have to be angry to walk away. You don't have to be loud to be clear. You don't have to burn bridges, just stop watering them. Because not every connection deserves resurrection. Not every relationship is meant to be saved. Some are lessons, some are mirrors, some are warnings. But all of them are invitations to choose you. And now you're choosing you. You're choosing the version of yourself that's whole. Not because someone completed you, but because you remembered you were never broken. You're choosing conversations that feed your spirit, not drain your soul. You're choosing stillness over stress, depth over distraction, purpose over performance. You're choosing to walk like you know who you are, because now you finally do. You're a woman who's not afraid of being misunderstood, a woman who doesn't rush into noise just to feel needed, a woman who's no longer afraid of saying, "That's not for me." You don't just hold space, you hold standards, and if someone can't meet them, that's not your cue to lower them. That's your confirmation that you've outgrown the place they're still choosing to stay. Let them set, let them circle. Let them remain in the shallow end if that's what they want. You've got oceans inside you, depth, mystery, power, and you're done wasting it on people who treat your heart like a convenience store. Open late, always available, no respect for the value inside. Not anymore. Now you see the pattern. Now you hear the silence between the words. Now you trust the feeling in your gut that says this isn't love. It's emotional labor disguised as connection. So you walk, not out of rage, not out of pride, out of wisdom, out of that deep inner knowing that your spirit isn't here to be tolerated. It's here to be treasured. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're not afraid of being alone, because being alone isn't lonely when you're at peace with yourself. Because being single doesn't mean you're lacking. It means you're available for alignment. You stop dimming, you stop delaying, you stop betraying your intuition just to feel safe. Because now you know safety isn't found in comfort zones. It's found in truth, in honoring your no, in trusting your not yet, in saying, I'm not who I used to be, and I'm not going back there to prove it. You don't owe anyone your past just because they were part of it. You don't owe anyone a second chance at the cost of your mental peace. You don't owe anyone access just because they finally notice your worth. You owe yourself a future that feels like freedom. And yes, you can still be gentle. You can still have grace in your voice and steel in your spine. You can still believe in love without giving it away on credit. You can still support others without abandoning yourself. Because this version of you, she is fire and flow. She is softness and strength. She is holy ground, not to be walked on, but to be honored. So the next time you're tempted to explain your boundaries to someone who keeps violating them, pause. The next time you find yourself justifying your standards, pause. The next time someone calls you too much for demanding basic respect, pause. And remember this, you didn't come this far to become small again. You didn't heal this much to be hurt the same way. You didn't awaken just to go back to sleep. You came to rise, to root, to reign. So let them call you what they want. Let them label your clarity as coldness. Let them mistake your peace for pride. You know the truth. You are not a doormat. You are not a second choice. You are not an emotional dumping ground. You are love refined. You are wisdom embodied. You are power gently held. You see, when a woman begins to honor herself fully, the game changes. She stops asking the world for what she can now give herself. She doesn't seek validation in tired spaces. She doesn't lower the volume of her intuition just to stay in relationships that fear her evolution. She becomes rooted, not in the idea of being liked, but in the truth of being real. Because when you're real, you no longer make room for half-hearted gestures. You no longer accept energy that's inconsistent. You no longer convince anyone to stay. You let their absence be the answer. Their words were too afraid to speak. And when that moment comes, there's no bitterness, just a quiet release, just a subtle shifting of your energy, just a decision not to beg, not to plead, not to chase, but to rise. Rise above the noise, rise beyond the patterns, rise out of the spaces where your worth was negotiated instead of honored. You are not the version of you who used to tolerate less just to keep a seat at the table. You've built a new table, one that doesn't require shrinking, one that doesn't demand performance, one that doesn't trade your value for proximity. And at this table, peace is served first. Self-respect is not optional. Reciprocity is the entry fee. The people seated here don't question your boundaries, they appreciate them. They don't ask you to explain your growth. They match you. They don't resent your clarity. They respect the fact that it cost you something to earn it. So now, you move differently, not because you're guarded, but because you're intentional. Not because you're closed, but because you're careful. Not because you're cold, but because you understand warmth is a gift, and not everyone deserves to stand close to your flame. This isn't about building walls, this is about installing doors, and only those who knock with respect get invited in. You're no longer driven by fear of loss. You know now, anything that leaves when you love yourself better was never rooted in truth. Anything that fades when you stop people-pleasing was built on illusion. Anything that resists your growth was never meant to grow with you. There is nothing selfish about choosing alignment. There is nothing harsh about ending cycles that no longer serve you. There is nothing rude about wanting more than the bare minimum. The world might call you hardened. They'll say you've changed, that you're not as sweet as you used to be. But you know better, not hardened. You're focused. You're not cold. You're wise. You're not less sweet. You're just no longer available to those who mistake sugar for substance. Your love still runs deep. Your care still overflows, but now it's directed toward people who pour back, people who show up, people who don't just say the right things, they embody them. You've reclaimed your standards not to push others away, but to call the right ones closer. That's the beauty of the shift. You don't just remove what drains you. You make space for what honors you. friendships that uplift, relationships that restore, spaces that feel like sunlight, not survival. And through it all, you never lost your essence. You just stopped wasting it. You stopped entertaining what only took. You stopped carrying what should have been let go long ago. You stopped offering yourself as a solution to people who refuse to solve their own problems. And with every step forward, you began to feel lighter. Not because life stopped being hard, but because you stopped being available to what made it harder. You stopped carrying guilt that wasn't yours. You stopped chasing clarity from people who thrived on confusion. You learned that saying no is a complete sentence. That being unavailable is sometimes the most powerful form of healing. That distance doesn't mean anger, it means you finally understand the price of your energy. You've seen what happens when you give too much, when you give without checking whether there's a return, when you stay too long in situations that only teach you how to survive, not how to thrive. But now survival is no longer your identity. Now you are learning how to bloom, and bloom you will in rooms that once intimidated you, in conversations you once avoided, in dreams you once buried, just to be accepted. You're finally allowing yourself to be seen. Not the edited version, not the palatable version, the real version. And in that there is liberation, there is courage, there is life. You speak differently now, with calm, with confidence, with the quiet knowing that comes from no longer needing to convince anyone of your worth. You don't audition for roles that require emotional shape-shifting. You don't wait to be chosen. You choose yourself. You don't compromise your peace to fit into narratives you've already outgrown. There's power in that. There's freedom in that. There's divinity in that. And you hold it all with elegance. You're not here to prove anything anymore. You're not here to keep peace by sacrificing your soul. You're not here to hold the weight of other people's expectations while yours go unmet. You're here to embody the woman who finally knows her value and refuses to let it be negotiated ever again. So you walk taller, you love wiser, you rest deeper, and you release the need to explain it to anyone who can't see the beauty in your becoming. Because this journey, this awakening, it was never about them. It was about you, about the girl you once were who needed everyone to approve, about the woman you are now who moves in purpose, and about the queen you're still becoming, who gives love but never at the cost of self. You lead with compassion, but you are no longer led by compromise. You give with abundance, but you've learned the art of protecting your source. You open your heart, but never again will you allow it to be a landing pad for chaos. You've earned this, you've bled for this, you've risen for this, so no matter how gentle you remain, your life will never again be built on tolerance for what diminishes you. And that is power. There's a moment quiet and visible to the world where a woman looks in the mirror and finally sees herself again. Not the version distorted by people's opinions, not the one dulled by years of bending, but the real her. The one who knows what she deserves, knows what she won't accept, knows that her time is sacred, her presence a privilege, her heart not to be mishandled again. And in that moment, everything changes. She no longer chases closure because she's closed the door herself. She no longer worries about being understood because her peace doesn't require explanation. She no longer grieves the past because the lesson was enough. You don't need permission to evolve. You don't need consensus to grow. You don't need approval to say I'm done. Shrinking to be digestible. Done dimming just to be tolerated. Done bending for those who refuse to rise. This isn't hardness, this is clarity. This isn't bitterness, this is discernment. This isn't distance, this is healing. When you're finally honest about what no longer serves you, the weight begins to fall away. The fear, the guilt, the second guessing, and in its place, power. Not loud power, not performative power, but real, grounded, embodied power. The kind that doesn't ask, doesn't beg, doesn't chase. The kind that simply moves forward. You don't owe anyone access just because they knew you before the healing. You don't have to return to environments that can't hold who you've become. You don't have to explain your exit from anything that cost you your peace, because you weren't put here to babysit brokenness. You were put here to build, and building starts with boundaries. If someone can only love you when you make yourself smaller, it was never love, it was control. If someone calls you difficult for holding them accountable, it was never partnership, it was performance. If someone disappears the moment you stop overextending, it was never connection, it was convenience. And the truth, it hurts, not because they left, but because you realize how long you stayed. Not because you lost them, but because you lost pieces of yourself trying to keep them. But now you are rebuilding. Now you are remembering. Now you are rising without apology, without guilt, without waiting for someone to cheer you on. You don't need an audience to become your best self. You don't need applause to know you're doing the right thing. You don't need to be loud to walk in purpose. In fact, most of your growth will be silent. Most of your strength will come in private. Most of your healing will bloom in the dark, far from the spotlight. And yet when the world sees you again, they'll wonder how you became so whole. They won't see the nights you cried alone. They won't know the conversations you had with God. They won't feel the ache of letting go, not just of people, but of patterns. But you will, and you'll know it was worth every tear, every no that felt uncomfortable, every distance you created to protect your spirit, every standard you enforced when the easy choice was to keep the peace. Because the real peace, it came later, not from others, from within. That deep peace, that soul-silencing, noise-cutting, storm-walking peace that comes when you finally realize you never had to lose yourself to be loved. You just had to stop confusing tolerance with love, attachment with connection, familiarity with destiny. Now you choose different. You choose people who don't flinch when you speak the truth. You choose environments that celebrate your fire, not just your flowers. You choose silence over chaos, peace over patterns, presence over pretending. You lead with warmth, but you are no longer afraid to walk alone. You give with joy, but you've retired the role of martyr. You forgive with grace, but you've stopped reopening doors to disrespect. This is your standard now. If it costs your voice, it's too expensive. If it asks you to be less, it's not for you. If it feels heavy, unclear, or unsafe, trust it. Your intuition is your guide, not your enemy. Your standards are your light, not your burden. Your boundaries are your protection, not your punishment. And hear this, just because you're kind doesn't mean you're blind. Just because you see the best in people doesn't mean you ignore the worst. Just because you're gentle doesn't mean you'll tolerate nonsense in the name of love. Love isn't a battlefield. It's not a transaction. It's not a test of how much pain you can take without breaking. Love is a mirror. Love is a soft place to land. Love is truth, spoken, lived, and protected. And if it doesn't feel like that, it's not love. It's labor. You're not here to keep proving your worth. You're not here to fix people who refuse to grow. You're not here to abandon your needs just to make others feel comfortable. You are here to thrive, to rest, to breathe. You've carried enough. You've explained enough. You've sacrificed enough. Now you're walking into a new chapter, one where your gentleness is met with respect, where your presence is met with consistency, where your vulnerability is not seen as weakness, but as a rare and sacred gift. You have every right to want more. You have every right to raise the bar. You have every right to start over, not because you failed, but because you finally understood what success really means. A life that feels like peace, relationships that feel like safety, days that begin with joy, not dread. This isn't just healing, it's homecoming. This isn't just growth, it's return. Return to the woman you were always meant to be before the world asked you to break yourself into bite-sized pieces. No more shrinking, no more waiting, no more surviving. This is the era of thriving, of walking in truth, of speaking your mind, of living in alignment. You've done the work, you've endured the fires, you've earned the right to live boldly. So walk forward with your head high, not as someone who's perfect, but as someone who's finally whole. No more compromises, no more crumbs, no more confusion. You know who you are now, and you will never again let anyone treat you like you don't.